Hello and welcome back to Your Property Podcast. With us today, we've got Mike Stenhouse. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm excellent. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on, and obviously a fellow podcaster as well from the Inside Property Investing podcast. And Phil, I'll just do a quick bio for people who don't know about you already. So you started investing as a hobby back in the day, and then focused on HMOs with your wife to retire yourselves from the day jobs. So you've moved from the corporate world into property full time now, and you've been investing for almost 20 years with diversified portfolio to include single let, service accommodation and commercial property. It's been 10 years, nearly, almost coming up to 10 years, that you launched the IPI, the Inside Property Investing podcast, to share stories of over 400 inspiring investors to help others looking to succeed in the industry. And obviously, we just had you interviewed me 4 months ago to be on it as well, and that was pretty cool. So I thought, let's get you on ours and have a chat on our side as well, because it's good to turn the tables.
Yeah, well, it's definitely I find a little bit easier to ask the questions, and that's not to diminish your job today, Michelle. But like, you get into a routine, don't you? And you just kind of you kind of show up, you hit record, and it becomes almost habitual, versus actually having to like think about the answer to questions. It's a little bit more challenging.
Definitely, I completely agree. It's well, this is what we're used to, so it's a bit more natural, but also interesting to hear your story as well, because like you, when we're on the podcast, we're always interviewing, we're always asking the questions, and we're not really sharing what our story is and our successes and things that other people can learn from as well. So it's great to have you on. And actually, for anyone who's not yet heard the other interview where Mike interviewed me, I shared a story about how back in the day. So if you've just coming up to 10 years, it must be 10 years nearly, because I remember starting with your podcasts as one of the very first things that I did to get into property. And I would look forward to, I think you were doing 3 a week back then. And
yeah, I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah.
And so I was looking forward to them because I listened to them on the journey to work and back, and I listened to all of them for ages, and I connected with the people who you interviewed. And one thing that struck me really early on was, as I connected with each person you'd interviewed on the social media, I realized they were already all connected, and there was this kind of underworld of property education that I'd kind of snuck into here, and it was pretty cool. And actually what happened was, which I don't think I mentioned on yours. So I listened to a guy called Barry Davis, who had his own mentorship at the time. So I ended up, having heard him through your podcast, going on his mentorship. It's like a year-long mastermind.
Okay.
And that's where I met Jane from YPN. So actually, that's how I got in with your property network. And then, full circle, here I am now, back interviewing you. So
that's awesome.
It's crazy. So there's a little backstory for everyone who's listening there. But yeah, tell us about how it's been, because obviously you've taken I want to say a kind of a bit of unique journey from a lot of people who get into property, where they get the portfolios, and then they get the portfolio which buys back their time, and then they just end up buying more property or just doing more in property. Where have you kind of taken a few detours around the world, haven't you? So tell us about that, because that sounds really fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's something that's worth keeping in mind, is like that reason why you get started investing in property. It's almost addictive. I think if you hang around in this industry for any length of time, it's because you've got a real passion for it, and it can be hard to stop and think, wait, hang on. When I first started investing, I thought, if I've got a couple of HMOs bringing in a few grand a month, I could retire and never need to work again. And then before you know it, 10 years have passed, and you're thinking, why the heck am I still going? So keeping that clarity on your reason why, and of course your goals can change and get bigger, and you might have kids, and things will change. That's fine. But just remembering to every so often sit back and think, like, why did I actually get into this? What do I want my life to look like, rather than just keep buying more and more houses. and assets, because there's more to it. None of us buy property for the sake of buying property, right? Like we buy it for the stuff that it can give us. Um, but yeah, we made a decision. It's getting too much like a distant memory now. Probably 6 years ago, to sell our house, and we were in the UK investing in Stockport, kind of near Manchester. Realized that a lot of what we were doing was kind of laptop based, and didn't really need to be on the ground a huge amount anymore. So thought, well, let's go and have an adventure. Long story short, we sold our house, we bought a boat, and then we spent 4 years. I think it was 2019, probably the first year, up to 23. Did we sell it last year? Maybe it was, no, 2019 up to 22. So that was 4 years, 4 summers back to back on the boat in the Med. We had plans to sail the world and kind of go further afield, but COVID and, stuff got in the way, including our first child. But yeah, we not, that sounds really bad. She did not get in the way. She was, it was planned, but yeah, we spent 4 years split time. So we were out of the UK like 9 months of the year, and then we'd come back for 3 months over winter, catch up on things, do Christmas and all that fun stuff. But yeah, we did that for 4 years, and then we ended up selling the boat at the end of the 22 season, and then we've been back in the UK for almost 2 years now. Like I say, it feels like it's becoming too much of a distant memory, but yeah, it was a lot of fun at the time.
Wow. Well, I love this idea. I think it's incredible. And I'm sure you've heard of Tim Ferriss as well. He talks about
Absolutely,
these
yep.
mini retirements where
Mhm.
you have these lifelong goals that you've always wanted to do that most people save for when they retire. And actually, this idea of having a mini retirement is you do something that you would do in your retirement, but bring it forward, make it a mini version of that. And that kind of sounds like what you've done there, but with the
Yeah.
bonus of actually being able to keep the business going at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a big part of it was like we had to keep the business going. We had staff back in the UK. You've got tenants, and we had things that needed to keep going. So it was about location freedom rather than time freedom. I went there knowing I was going to keep working, but
Yeah.
I was just fortunate that I got to do it in the sunshine rather than Stockport.
Yeah. Well, I admit, this idea of time freedom, location freedom, financial freedom. I think these three freedoms are super important. I think the location freedom and time freedom are often overlooked on this pursuit of financial freedom. So for me, the time freedom isn't necessarily about having, all the free time in the world just to sit back and, play golf or be on the beach or whatever you want to do. Actually, it's about the flexibility to choose when you work or to have control over your own schedule.
Yeah.
So how did that work while you were on the boat?
It was challenging. I'd love to sit here and say, oh, it was easy and everything was rosy all the time. But like what we realized that we weren't really aware of, we were probably naive when we moved on to the boat. It was, just living on a boat can be a bit of a struggle. You've got weather forecast, like the weather dictates so much of your life to you that you didn't realize. You're in all these beautiful places, but you realize the nearest supermarket's like a 5 mile trek away. So, you're kind of sweating on your push bike in the Mediterranean, 35 degrees summer, thinking, oh my goodness, what I would do for a cold drink and a Magnum right now. But, so like just existing on the boat actually became more of a job than we expected it would. And because some of it was difficult to plan around, like the weather, for instance, or whether or not marinas would have space for us when we wanted to go there, it had to be really flexible. It was detrimental for sure to the business. Like I thought, the business is growing, it will keep growing, and we probably sustained it where it was. So it didn't thrive whilst we were away. But in hindsight, that was a fine compromise. But yeah, I mean, I think, a big part of property investment, there's some stuff that is urgent. But what I find is that, there's very little that can't be done on your schedule. Maybe something needs a response within 24 hours, but that's still a big window of time to get back to people. If there is a genuine emergency, we had people in place on the ground. So we had a couple of team members back here, one looking after the property management, one looking after project management. So, one looking after our tenants, one looking after our builders effectively. So they were kind of keeping an eye on all the urgent stuff, and I could get involved with my role kind of running the business as and when I had availability. So I'd probably work like, I'd get up and maybe do a couple hours in the morning with my coffee. And then that was more or less it. Occasionally we'd have a long passage where I could catch up on stuff more meaningfully. And I would fly back to the UK maybe like once over the course of the summer, usually to sign documents with our solicitors, because like conveyancing is still just the most backwards, outdated process that exists in the world, and they won't accept electronic signatures in most cases. But yeah, generally speaking, it was like a lot of the day-to-day stuff that you think of as like a landlord, we had people in place to look after. So my role was more kind of big picture strategy, sourcing deals, and that could be done as and when I had time, really. So it was quite flexible.
Well, I bet it forced you to be working on the business more than in the business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we went away for the first summer, thinking, okay, this is good. We've got a team in place and it works well. And that's when the cracks started to really show in the processes that weren't as well nailed down as we thought. And I can't remember where it comes from, who said it originally, but this idea of like, if you want to really see whether you've got a business or a job, go away for a month and see what it looks like when you come back. So we kind of did that, but on steroids. We went away for 9 months and came back, and we realized that one of our team members kind of wasn't up to scratch, but we had that 3-month winter period to recruit and onboard a new member of staff who's still with us to this day and is a fantastic asset. But I think so many people make excuses or kind of come up with reasons why things won't work. And we could do that all the time. We could spend all of our day coming up with reasons why things might not work, or we could say, well, you know what, let's give it a shot and make it work. And yes, there will be problems, but we'll probably be able to fix them. We're smart. We've got to this stage. We've been able to buy, whether you've done a couple of property deals or you've been doing it for a decade or more. Like most of the people listening to this podcast will have a good level of expertise and education. Like you can fix problems, you can do hard things. And I guess just choosing to what that hard looks like, we're going to go away and things are going to break, but we'll fix them. Again, for me, it was like, I don't mind working, I don't mind there being problems, as long as I'm sitting on the back of a boat in the sunshine and I get a gin and tonic at the end of the day. That's all good. I'll happily solve problems from there all the time.
Exactly right. You're going to have those problems anyway. So where you are, you may as well choose where you're going to be to solve them.
Yeah, for sure.
And starting with what's possible rather than what could go wrong. Like, yes, understanding what's the worst case scenario, and then just dealing with that and making sure that's covered. But then go out and make what's possible. So yeah. So you've obviously done that. You've come back, and now congratulations on your second child.
Thank you.
And as you said before, goals change, life changes, and it's great to have the flexibility to change with it. So I'm curious about this, the idea of when is enough and is enough, because like you, I love the hustle. I love the chatting to the landlords, the deals and getting things over the line, and that does always seem to be another deal around the corner. I don't know why, it just and especially when you like yourself, we've got lots of contacts and people know to send you deals and things. It's tempting, isn't it, to to think, oh well, I'll just have a look at it. But what's your plan at the moment? Are you kind of focused on a certain path, or are you still open to looking at deals?
There's again, a little bit of flexibility built in, I suppose. We've got a clear idea long term of where we want to get to. I think I'll be involved in the property industry for life, effectively, whatever that looks like. If I ever choose to retire, I'm sure even in my retirement I'll still be flipping the odd house here and there. But we're still very much investing actively at the moment. We have a kind of grandiose long-term plan of creating 500 new homes throughout Stockport / South Manchester. Originally, I said within the next decade when I first came up with that, and I was like, you know what, that's a lot of stress. We're in a phase of life right now where this was before kids. Our eldest is now 2.5, and I've probably realized that that takes up a lot of time as well. So I'm less pressured about the within a decade now. I'd still like to do that long term just because of the impact that I see that could have on ourselves personally. It's more than enough that we would need financially, but just thinking about having some small scale impact on the housing crisis and all that stuff. 500 is a number that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and I still have that number at the back of my head, albeit, like I say, I've kind of removed that time frame from it. We are nearing completion on two projects that have been a bit of a noose around my neck for longer than I would care to admit, just with planning delays and then construction delays. We take on problem projects quite often. So, rather than just doing simple single lets or resi, like I like to buy stuff that will be a planning battle, that will be, it'll annoy all the neighbors. It will be problematic from a construction point of view. And, just getting our teeth stuck into kind of meaty problems. But two of those are nearing completion. We've got one that's just kind of nearing completion on the second planning application now that will be starting soon. So my capacity is going to be freed up a little bit in the next couple of months once the two current ones are kind of off my desk. The third one that's starting up soon won't be as much of a, I shouldn't say that. I really shouldn't say that. I was going to say it won't be as much of a time drain. It might be, but one versus two will be fine.
Right.
And we have actually just kind of started thinking about our next mini retirement, which probably involves leaving the UK again next year and heading out to buy a house in the French Alps. Lots of reasons for that, but a big one is just kind of the environment that we'd like to raise our children in. So what that means from a project point of view is probably not taking on a huge volume of deals. We will keep investing, but maybe one project at a time, maybe two. In the past, we've done 4, 5, or 6 deals concurrently, and that feels like we learned our lesson on the boat of trying to do too much. So we're thinking, we'll probably be out of the UK for another 3 to 5 year window. We'll keep the projects moving, but at a slower pace, and just enjoy that next adventure.
Yeah, it's matching the phase of your life with the strategy, I guess, the property investing as well. So,
yeah,
are you thinking? Because then you need to match the market, right? There's so many different things that overlap. You can't go down one route if it's not compatible with what's going on with the market.
Yeah, I mean, I'm less passionate, and this isn't me being argumentative. It's just my view on things with regards to the market. I've looked at a lot of data. We've been investing. Despite how long we've been investing for, we actually started. I think like just after the last, maybe about the first one pre 2008. But I haven't really seen. Just I've been investing for 15 plus years. I haven't seen a market cycle in full swing yet. So, I've still got a lot to learn, but just looking at the data and thinking if we buy consistently slow and steady, and just focus on timing the market versus timing the market. If you look back at the data, the amount of growth leading up to a recession versus how much they actually drop by on average, I think the portfolio that we've got now, we're in a comfortable position that even if there was a correction or a crash, we'd probably keep going. Because if I buy one deal a year every year for the next 20 years, I'm sure 1 or 2 of them might be bought at the wrong time, but the other 18 will offset them. So I'm less fussed about kind of market cycle and what's going on, whether it's the Labour government or Conservative government interest rates. I think there's always scope to make to make money from UK property. Just because the housing market's screwed, right? Like there's just such an undersupply. So less fussed about that, but yeah, absolutely. Like life cycle and stage that has a big impact on our decisions for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just looking at it over the long term and not being worried too much about the details right now, because at the end of the day, we're all going to be in the same boat, aren't we? If we, it'll create opportunities for everyone who doesn't want to be in the boat, and they'll be off selling up, and then there'll be more deals on the table for like me and you.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah. And so you've had this experience of being, abroad and being away from the day to day, and then
Mhm.
you've got in mind looking forward about going away again for an extended period of time. So, what are some key systems for people who might want the option to do that? How, where would they? What's a good place to start for setting up systems that
Yeah.
would help you to be more remote?
So, I mean, I think I'm trying to think back in the approach that we took. The first thing that we did, I wouldn't necessarily go in this order, but the first thing that we did was get some help in our business from a virtual assistant. So overseas, relatively low cost, comparable to UK wages, and they just started helping out with some day-to-day admin. I mean, virtual assistants, they can, it's a broad term. They can do everything from bookkeeping and admin to tenancy agreements, guest communications for service accommodation, maintenance, um, social media and marketing. So like, they're really just a good first hire to help with, like, when you get to the stage that property starts to feel like it's becoming a full-time job. And you actually, you kind of go from like this hungry new investor focusing on your first deal and sourcing and renovations and all the kind of exciting stuff to all of a sudden drowning in paperwork and emails and admin. I think that's a good point where you start bringing some help in. Um, we chose to hire within our own company to do property management rather than to outsource it to an agency. Part of the reason for that has since changed. We did that because HMO management, it wasn't super strong in our area. There weren't any really great agents that we thought we can leave our portfolio with them and really trust that they're going to do a good job. So we decided to do that in-house. But another benefit of doing that in-house is that, the size of portfolio that we had when we first brought that in, it wasn't a full-time job for somebody else to manage. I think when we got to about 25 or 30-ish rooms, we made our first full-time hire, and that probably cost us about 2 grand a month. But their full capacity wasn't taken up by managing 25 to 30 rooms. So all of a sudden they had capacity where they could be meeting, Electricity Northwest on site to discuss where the utility connections were coming in. Maybe not making decisions on project management, but certainly just performing a role to give people access and that sort of thing. So I kind of got addicted to hiring people relatively quickly. A, because I'm kind of lazy. I don't like leaving the house if I don't have to, and B, because I started to see that my time was going to get constrained. And even if you're in the UK, whether you're looking to move abroad or not, um, if you want your business to grow, you need to focus on those high value tasks, sourcing new deals, financing those deals, and then kind of managing people, managing team, like the leadership of the business. And yeah, I realized that more and more of my time was on lower value tasks like bookkeeping and responding, like customer service type stuff. So I think you need to realize when that pendulum is swinging and you become more of like an admin low value role in your business rather than the leader, and then start to hire to replace that stuff so that you can kind of get back into that position where you can grow your business. And like I say, I think that's the same whether you want to be in the UK with more time to take your kids to school, or you want to be traveling the world. It's more or less the same principles, I think, but team is a big part of it. And then from there, I think it comes into, you mentioned like systems and processes, and I don't know if there's any specific systems I would say, but like we've been through a process for years of just documenting everything that happens in our business. Some people call them standard operating procedures. Tim Ferriss talks about it a lot in the 4 Hour Work Week, but just having guides that people can follow. This is how I want a tenancy application to go. So you just follow these steps, and then, hey presto, you've got a tenant that's been referenced and credit checked, and they've filled in all the information, and they've got the keys, and they've paid their deposit and all that sort of stuff. And like, I don't think the business that we operate in is particularly complex, but it can get overwhelming really quickly if we don't apply that sort of approach to it. So like, I don't think I've got any new ideas. I've just followed what a lot of other people have advised from like a time freedom and a kind of personal, like small business growth point of view, and it seems to have worked.
Yeah. Well, on that note, you mentioned about following what other people have said.
Mm.
400 guests on your podcast now, so 400 property investors you've interviewed. What have you learned from interviewing so many people? There must be kind of trends that stand out, or themes, or anything kind of personal that you've picked up on, that reading between the lines of what people say, that has been useful for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends who I'm speaking to, but if you think about it from like a new investor point of view, somebody who's kind of just getting started, um, I think that overwhelming analysis paralysis is probably like the biggest factor that you are fighting against. It's not sourcing deals or anything like that. It's kind of just getting out of your own way. And I say this with all the love in the world, but it's often the kind of the smarter, more educated people. I think there's a grammatical error there, which kind of shows that maybe that's not necessarily me, but the more intelligent the aspiring investor is, the more likely they are to come up with problems and obstacles, or think, they get into the weeds of like their spreadsheets and think, I can't quite decide. This has got 17.1% ROI and this one's got 17.2%, and it's just too close to call. Whereas if you just simplify it, like, you will make mistakes along the way. There will be deals that you look back on and think, oh, maybe that wasn't perfect, but so much of the growth and the education that people get comes from actually just like jumping off the deep end and making an investment decision. And they're the ones that I see achieve the most success. The ones who, again, kind of going back to what I was saying about being on the boat, like, there will be problems along the way, but you have enough self-confidence and belief that you'll be able to figure them out. And just really getting started. We spoke a little bit about time in the market versus timing the market. I don't think there is a bad time to invest. I don't think that there is really a better or worse strategy or location. I think, whether it's HMOs or service accommodation or commercial conversions, whether it's in Brighton or up in Blackpool, you can make it work. And there are, in those 400 episodes, there are examples of people who've made virtually every strategy work in virtually every location. And I think what sets them apart is the fact that they've just said, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to make it work and get stuck in, rather than spend 5 years. Nothing against education, but you can get too much into that, and you can think that I need to know every answer to every question and every piece of the puzzle before I do the first thing. And I think it's impossible to. You need to get started to get that clarity. And it's the people who get started that will ultimately have more success.
Yeah, completely agree. Just take some action, get started, put a stake in the ground, and then it's the momentum that comes from that. And then it's great to be part of a community where you can get your follow-up questions answered. But yeah, I agree. See so much of it where people are stuck at the beginning, whether to start.
Yeah.
And you see it when you go to networking meetings, and 4 years has passed and people are still there and they're coming, but they haven't moved on. They haven't bought anything. They haven't negotiated any deals. And anything that's surprised you from the people that you've interviewed, or anything that stands out that you think, wow, that was a really insightful thing that they said?
I mean,
or do they all just blur? How about you?
No, there's a somewhat negative thought in my head, if you don't mind me sharing it, and I don't mean it to be negative, but possibly as something to watch out for. There have been, and I'm not going to name names. If you went back through our archive and you saw missing episode numbers, there have been some people who, I think the point to make is that it can be difficult to really get a sense of somebody in a short period of time. We don't do a huge amount of due diligence on our guests. We don't go into like their financial records or anything like that. And unfortunately, there have been people that I thought, oh, they sound great. This is a great story, really inspiring. Turns out, they're not who they say they are. They haven't done what they said they've done. And as with any industry, I think there are some people out there looking to make a quick buck. And I suppose you just need to have your guard up, that you started off by saying you were introduced into this kind of property social network. There are so many great people out there. I remember the first networking event I went along to. I hadn't experienced a kind of like a sales pitch before, they kind of rush to the back of the room. We've only got 10 copies. And I was sitting there thinking, there's only 10 of them, Victoria, we need to go. We need to go. And actually I was super grateful because the host of that meeting, I'd met her before, and she said, just sit and watch the next presentation, and got to the end of the next one. And it was exactly the same, like, close. And she was like, so, there's a bit of, I was very naive, I suppose. And I think, although I'm telling people to, get stuck in, get started, properties, like, it's a long-term investment. And, if it takes you a couple of weeks, a couple of months, like, you're just running your own race. So you still need to feel comfortable with it. So I suppose maybe it's like the counter argument to getting stuck in is that you can take your time to do your due diligence. If something feels too good to be true, ask around. Somebody else might have some experience. And yeah, just, take a breath and do what feels right for you. Because I'm very guilty of saying, like, get stuck in, go out and buy your first deal. But at the same time, like, it's a big investment decision, and you need to be conscious of what you're doing, who you're working with. Only you can know what is right. So, yeah, just when you said surprises, I suppose that was the only negative thing that's come about of the podcast, is just that, I have been disappointed a couple of times over the years with people who maybe haven't lived up to their own reputation, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because, over such a long period, there's bound to be people who, they get out of their depth. I think, we've both heard of these people who, I think most of the stories I've heard where it has gone wrong have been from people who have overextended themselves. They haven't intentionally gone out to, to steal money or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just something's fallen apart in the way that they've, built their business, or that they've taken on too much, and it's, the house of cards has fallen down, sadly. But yeah, it comes back, as you say, to the due diligence of working with people, working on the deals, and understanding that, there is an element of risk as well. So do as much as you feel is necessary, and then take some action. But at the end of the day, you're never going to know. You're never going to know 100% if this is the right property or the right deal, or you're just going to have to take a risk and go with your gut, I suppose.
Yeah, I think, if I look at the more positive side of things as well. Again, maybe it's connected to that, but the most consistent success stories I see are from the kind of slow and steady, like the hare versus the tortoise. The tortoise always wins. I think of some of the guests that we've spoken to, who I know you've had on your podcast, who've spoken at YPN events, and I think there's a reason that they stand out in the industry as such strong success stories. They're not offering any get rich quick schemes. They're not, they're not overnight successes. They've been in the industry for a while as well. And it's that consistent, staying in the game. Like, I talk about a deal that we bought years ago, this car park that was going to be a new build development. Probably now 6 or 7 years ago, we bought this piece of land. And, all things considered, the deal has been a bit of a disaster, but it wasn't such a big project for us that if it went wrong, everything, talking about the house of cards, like, there was more at our base than just this one project. Had that been our first ever deal, had we rushed into it, or had we, somebody convinced us, oh, new build development's the only way to make money, and we thought, well, we don't have any experience, but sure, let's try it, that really could have messed us up big time. But fortunately, we didn't get into that project until we had some stability in our income. We had some experience. We've been able to kind of weather it a little bit. And it was a big lesson for me that, no single deal is ever going to allow us to be, like, financially free, right? It's like consistent smaller deals that get you there. But also, B, you should never risk everything that you've built so far on a single deal. So that was kind of humbling, and the fact that it's still there in the background, it's a nice reminder to me every day that we don't always make the best investment decisions. But yeah, I'm thinking, she's on my mind because she was on the promo that I saw for the YPN event. Jackie Tomes, I think, is a great example of somebody who has been in the industry for a long time, slow and steady, consistent growth. And I say slow and steady, like they've built a phenomenal portfolio, right? It doesn't mean it's boring, but they've not done, they're not, oh, we've been investing for 6 months and here's our, like, here's our advice on how to be financially free, or it's not some skeezy scam. It's just like consistent action time after time. And, they're living a phenomenal life as well with their travels. And it's stories like that that really stand out to me. Jackie and David are just one example, but they're the real success stories I see. The people who are, they appreciate it's hard work, they put in the hard work, they keep going, rather than people who think, oh, this is, a get rich quick scheme, I can retire in 12 months. It's not the reality for most of us. So I think just having that patience built into your plan, I think that's where it starts to compound and you get the real success from.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's great. We did a feature on people who'd been in the industry for 10 years or more. And it was great. It's really interesting to kind of see, who they were and what their, just like how they'd built the portfolio over time. And exactly, just going back to what you say, slow and steady wins the race, and just going at your own pace as well. Not, the likes of Jackie, who's had phenomenal success and she's done it in her own kind of steady way, even, and at some point, I think people do benefit from this compound effect as well, whether it's, through their network of just people getting to know them and trusting them. And then the success kind of tails up at the end, right? 'Cause the more people know, like, and trust you, the more they'll invest with you and the more opportunities you get as well. So
yeah,
I suppose it's natural that happens.
I was reading a book.
So
Sorry, if you don't mind, it's on that compound piece. And again, this stat has been shared before, but I was reading a book, and one of the kind of segments that stood out to me was about Warren Buffett's fortune. He's worth something like 85 billion, certainly when this book was written. And I think by the time he reached like retirement age, 65, say, he'd made 3 billion. The remaining 82 billion of his 85 billion net worth was made after his 65th birthday. I'm making those numbers up a little bit, but that was the gist of it. And yeah, it works for him. It works to a lesser degree for us as well. Like that time in the market, that consistent approach. Your point there, I think, is a great one as well. Not just about the deals that you've got or the income that you can generate, but your kind of brand and your staying power as well. If you've been around for a decade, there are going to be builders that you've worked with in the past who remember you when they come across a good project, or potential investors, whatever that looks like. Just being that staying power, whether it's in Margate with Jackie or in Stockport for us, that has a lot of advantages as well. And it's one thing you can't really cheat on, right? Like there is no shortcut to doing it for a decade.
Yeah.
No. So
yeah. Well, hopefully we'll be in this for many decades. We'll have to come back in 10 years and do another podcast swap.
Sure, absolutely.
So to wrap up then, final for people who are listening, we've got people listening at various stages, as of course you have on your podcast. Any kind of closing thoughts or comments for people, where we're at right now? Something to leave people with?
I mean, from a selfish point of view, one thing that I will always advocate, and I know everyone's got their own opinion on this, but I have built our property investment business around HMOs. And you mentioned in the intro, in our bio, that we've diversified, and that's given me some peace of mind knowing that we're not entirely reliant on income from our HMO portfolio, and that's great. But looking at the market just now, seeing everything that is going on, I think there's a lot going against us as property investors. There's a lot of reasons why you might look at the market and say, is this really a good time to get started? I keep coming back to the fact, though, that I think HMOs have got so much longevity and so much potential. There are plenty of people doing well in other industries, and if that interests you, then do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Absolutely. But with the way things are just now, everything compounding with interest rates and property prices, like I think that the single let market it's a tough nut to crack these days, to build a portfolio on single lets like it might have been even 10, but probably 20, 30 years ago, where you could build up. I'm trying to remember the name of that couple who bought like 300 houses, or like there were stories of that being feasible. Like I think that's a real challenge these days. I think that the HMO market is hugely appealing as a way for lots of people to live. I think the numbers continue to look phenomenal. The supply, it continues to be surpassed by the demand. We see this across the country, and it's a great place for anyone who's starting out. I'm not saying you need to invest in HMOs for the rest of your life, but if somebody came to me and said, the market does seem a little bit funny just now, like where would you suggest starting? Every day of the week, if I was starting out, I'd be looking at HMOs as a starting point. And yeah, maybe then you can diversify into service accommodation or commercial conversions, multi-unit freehold blocks. Like there are lots of different things that you can do. But if you're thinking, want to get a couple of deals under my belt, build up a bit of income, I think they're a hard opportunity to beat. So yeah, if you're kind of unsure as to which way to go, I would strongly encourage giving them serious consideration. And then I suppose for more experienced investors, people who've been around a while, maybe just a pat on the back, just the congratulations, because so many people I speak to and they've got a social media presence, they've been doing it for a number of years, but they still doubt themselves and they still have these challenges and they think, am I doing the right thing? And am I going about things in the right way? And I think if you have been able to stay in this industry for a period of time, like you deserve a bit of praise. We don't get praise from government, from our tenants. Like we're villainized. Is that even a word? But like we're the bad guy in a lot of people's stories. And I know a lot of us are doing this for financial reasons, but also I see so many of us doing this because we want to create great places for people to live. So no advice or tips necessarily, but just, I guess a bit of appreciation from one investor to another that like, it's nice to see the good guys that are trying to improve the housing standard. And yes, like I say, we're capitalists, we're trying to make money from this, but we're trying to do it in a way that also improves our local towns, our local economies, keeps people employed. Like there's a lot of benefits and advantages for
our own
other
families
people
as well. Yeah, just like, being able to have more time with the kids. I mean, it's to aspire to even that goal and to be able to achieve it and have that time freedom as well as the financial freedom, I think is, you're right, it's a huge achievement.
Yeah. So just a congratulations to you. I appreciate and acknowledge the hard work that you've put in. So yeah, I think like, people struggle. There's a lot of, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of kind of mental health and depression, but it exists and there is a great network there. And if you are struggling, like there are other people who are going through it as well, and other people I'm sure who would be willing to talk to you. So I think being self-employed generally is tough, and being a property investor possibly even more so. So yeah, just I take my hat off to you.
Well, that's a good place to wrap up. So tell us about where people can find out more about you and working with you, and what kind of you can offer for people.
Sure. So, I mean, the best place inside property investing, kind of across the web, whether that's on social media. Instagram is where we, I suppose, spend most of our online time, or podcasts on Spotify and iTunes and all that stuff. But just Googling inside property investing is usually the best place to reach out to us. And ironically enough, I suppose you maybe saw this coming. One thing that we help people with is investing in HMOs. So that might be something that you want some support with. But yeah, I'm not really here to sell or promote anything, Michelle, just to have a chat. And if people want to stumble across us on social media and see what we're up to, if you want to go and buy a yacht, I can give you some advice on that, or maybe advise you why not to do it. But yeah, I like having discussions with people in the industry, and yeah, like I say, social media, Instagram's probably the best place to find us and connect with us.
Perfect. Well, we'll put all of those in the show notes. And great, it's a good place to wrap up. Mike, thank you so much for your time. It's been really inspiring, been fun, and looking forward to seeing what's next for us both.
Great. Thanks for having us, Michelle.
Take care. And for everyone else who is not yet subscribed to the YPM membership, click the link in the show notes for a free 30-day trial. See you next time, guys.